Hello, friends, and welcome to UA Legends, the podcast where each episode shines a spotlight on a hidden gem of the user acquisition world. I'll be your host, Adam, and together with my guests, we're going to deep dive into the wonderful world of user acquisition. We're going to tackle pressing industry topics and discuss the secrets behind my guests' successes. Please don't forget to follow us on AppsFlyer's YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, or Amazon podcast channels. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's get on with it. Hey, Lucas, thank you very much for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on with me. Tell us about yourself. Who are you? What makes you tick? How did you get into user acquisition in the first place? What's interesting for you?
Great, so thanks for having me here, Adam. I'm an ordinary guy from Argentina. I was born and raised here, so you can tell that, I'm a Messi lover in some way. Also, I really enjoy eating asados every single day, if it's possible. And, I started my career here at an agency back in, I think it was the pandemic. I was born in the 2000s, so I'm quite young compared to some folks in the industry. I started working here.
Now.
So I started working at an agency here in Latin America, and that was my first move into the app growth industry or world. And I remember that my first day, the head of growth of that company was like, "Yeah, you should connect this into the MMP." And I was like, "I don't know what's an MMP."
What does that mean?
And I told him, yeah. And I was like, "Listen, if you want to fire me today, you can, because I don't want to tell you any type of bullshit here." And he was like really supportive at the beginning. He teach me like the fundamentals, the ecosystem, like everything that was surrounding MMPs and the logic behind it. And that's where I started. And after 6 or 7 months, I made my jump to Europe. A fintech company hired me, so I went and lived in Barcelona for a year and a half almost. And after that, I started working with different subscription apps, product data, developers, more technical aspect. And for the last years,
more and more into the details.
Exactly, that's right. And for the last years, I've been working specifically with iOS apps, gaming and subscription, and specifically also when it comes to measurement attribution. That's where I like to work, and that's what I'm doing today. Also, I quit Monkey Tap some months ago, and I'm working with some gigs that I have previously, and also building AppsStack on the side with some friends.
Some very cool stuff. We'll get into that in a little bit later. All right. I mean, as you say, like you've been working with iOS a lot, and obviously one of the biggest parts recently of iOS is SKAN, the thing that nobody and everyone wants to talk about at the same time. I'd love to understand what you feel SKAN has brought to the industry as a whole. Like, is it an overall positive thing or a negative thing? Are people thinking, this is Apple has completely destroyed the way that we do things now, or has it brought about more innovation into the industry and that kind of thing?
My short answer to that is that it just makes sense. I think, the guys for the team at Apple that, were thinking about SKAdNetwork before it was launched, I think they understood, where the privacy was going to be, 10 years after that. And also, politics, economic countries, bans, everything related to outside of the industry. I think that privacy is like a big topic, and I really believe that SKAdNetwork made sense. It actually makes sense. But of course, there are a lot of things that we're going to talk today that, maybe the execution, the way they implemented this, the way they communicate this to the community, the way, different technical aspects with the code implementation on the technical side, the way the marketers in the industry adapt to it, with try to seamlessly try to understand the basics. I think there are a lot of things to improve yet, but I think that it just makes sense. I really like the framework. I'm like pro SKAN in some way, because I believe that
do you think that comes because you've got a strong understanding of it? Like, do you think some of the negativity towards SKAN is because people just quite literally don't get it?
Well, let me tell you a fun story about this. So when I heard for the first time SKAdNetwork, it was on a AppsFlyer blog. I think this was back in the day, like 2021, maybe. I don't remember. But the fun fact is that you published this YouTube video with a girl talking about SKAdNetwork and the conversion values and all the logic behind this. And I was like, this is great because I didn't understand nothing about that video. And I was like, really interesting in this. And I was like, I remember watching that video for like maybe 100 times for at least 1 week per day. So it was crazy. And I really enjoyed it because the fact that it was something different and the fact that you are able to track users without knowing the user, that blew my mind. And of course, that was back in the day where, I don't know, fidelity types weren't available in the payload or different things were going on. So imagine all the advancement or improvements we are seeing today that
Yeah,
back in the day I was amazed by those changes.
it makes sense. It makes sense. All right, so you do an awful lot of consultancy with apps that are either early stage using SKAN or haven't even started using SKAN. Like, I'm interested to know what your advice would be to a company that perhaps isn't working with SKAN at the moment. Like, what do you say to them?
Cool. So I think that to answer this question, it will be more useful to tell you different experiences with big companies, like
Yeah,
plus
please.
500 employees working at this type of companies, because I want to compare this against, more real life indie or small medium publishers that
Yeah, yeah.
exist. So basically, SKAdNetwork will be there. Most of the apps run Meta, Google, TikTok, right? So SKAdNetwork will be on enable basically, and you will get these postbacks. Uh, the issue here is that most of the companies, at least big companies that I've been working with on the last, I don't know, 2 years, they love probabilistic. Okay. And because they are big companies, they can afford to lose maybe 10, 100, 200K per day. And basically, they don't care that much. But when you go to small to medium publishers, they really care about SKAdNetwork because they see that maybe probabilistic goes too probabilistic. Maybe it doesn't make any sense to trust AEM, or maybe you can't trust AppMob in Unity just for to say some networks, okay? Uh, and what I can tell to small to medium publishers is first, try to work with raw data, okay? Because it's free, it's available. It's just a JSON that you can read or parse whatever you want to do with that file, and you can host it. Oh, you can use an MMP like AppsFlyer, for example, but you don't need to go crazy at the beginning, okay? So of course, probabilistic native solutions from the ad networks could be a good choice if you have no volume in it. But once you start to scale, you need to have that backing or verification that the ad network is actually telling the truth. And that we can talk about this for hours and hours. But basically, my tip for small to medium publishers is try to stay within the self-reporting networks like Meta, Google, TikTok, for example. Maybe X, but I don't know anyone having huge success there.
Could be
And then
dangerous at the moment.
yeah, who knows? but yeah, try to keep it simple. Don't go crazy with the schema. Don't try to find different buckets, ranges, mix models. Try to focus on the event that you want to see back. This could be a registration, trail started, a subscription, an in-app purchase, whatever. Like, just try to see if the implementation that you created, it's sending you back the conversion value that you actually want SKAdNetwork to trigger. And once you understand that, then you can play with more values. Then you can play with the course in case you are enabled for the 4.0 version. You can try to play with session counts, event counts, total revenue events. Like you can apply different conditions.
Do you find that I don't know. I mean, I come from a social casino background, which is very money orientated and revenue orientated. But do you find that there are any events that you can use, in your testing and that kind of thing, that are a substitute for revenue flag? Like, is there anything? Have you found any other events in anything that you've done that can have equal or similar success as revenue event? I mean, everything's sort of tied up in revenue.
Yeah, I get that. So it depends. I mean, my honest answer to that, it will be it depends because every single app has a different flow, different cohort of users being into the app every single month. So it's really different. It
But
varies
ultimately,
from.
every app has a. I mean, there are exceptions to this, but the majority of apps have revenue in mind when they're being
That's
built.
true.
They're building on the understanding that it's going to generate revenue. So with that in mind, apart from using revenue buckets in the conversion value, is there any other? Do you see any benefit in mixing events with the revenue buckets?
That's tricky, okay, because you're minimizing the chance of getting the conversion value back most of the time. So
Yeah,
the way I
100%.
like to approach this is what is the most relevant proxy for revenue in a specific case. So imagine we can tell that maybe a start trial is the most relevant proxy for a subscription app, right? But maybe one or maybe zero point 0.5 out of 10 people start a trial in your app. So maybe you are not going to send enough signals to the ad network, right? And maybe that's not good for you. Maybe you
Yeah,
should focus on paywall view. You need to try and test that. So that's for example for a subscription. Of course, I like to target trial started most of the times, uh, and then try to optimize the onboarding or the flow to try to increase the conversion rate there. But when it comes to gaming or different type of apps that monetize based on ad revenue, that's completely different. Like maybe you an at level 5 achieved in less than 24 hours, or a combination of, you know, view the paywall 5 times and then created like a new avatar, for example,
yeah, yeah.
or I don't know, different logic that you can apply here. But again, the proxy will depend on your product, and that's the beauty of SKAdNetwork, that you can compare my schema to you can compare it from what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's not just something you want to copy one to one.
Exactly.
That's cool. That's cool. And so I guess the next logical step for this is the sort of slower adoption. Whenever there's a new version of SKAN, the slower adoption from the networks, and a lot of the networks work on a probabilistic methodology, and so are somewhat slower to adopt SKAN and to adopt the updates of SKAN and that kind of thing. Do you find that that's problematic, or is it fine? I mean, does it still work for you?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it is what it is. To be honest, we can't do anything about that. But the truth is that, this is expected when you have different big, really big companies trying to work together. The times are not the best when you want to deploy something into the market, and also when interests are not aligned, right? Because
Yeah, yeah,
Meta doesn't want you to use SKAdNetwork, of course, but Apple wants to push this. So
yeah,
it's sort of, I think there's a fight between these two big companies, but at the end of the day, uh, the way I like to approach my work, or the way I like to help different companies is trying to understand that, okay, Meta is going to be there. You can see what they think is happening within your product, but the only company that knows what's happening all across the board is Apple. They are the only ones. And also, this is like the core of the reasons why I want to save my money is who has more interest in taking money out of you here, right? And this is always the ad networks, of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
that want to push more postbacks, that want to manipulate the data, or that want to force you to use AEM, for example. And then when you go to the Meta account manager and tell them, hey, could you please explain how this works? And they, oh, AI models, the new fancy keyword that they just pull out. And they can share this with you, of course. And that's not good for me because there's no transparency on how this operates. And also, uh, when it comes to the adoption rate, people seems to, I don't know why, but when they first heard the term AAK, for example, or SKAdNetwork 4.0, they were like, oh, I need to master this, I need to be the best one. And then they don't realize that this was going to be roll out maybe in a year or like year and a half. Maybe there are a
Yeah.
lot of changes going on in the meantime.
What would be your tips in trying to get the most out of SKAN? Like, there's usage and then there's usage, and what do you feel are the best things that people can do in order to be able to get the absolute most out of SKAN?
That's a good question, and I will give you an example to explain this. So first, you need to understand what we want to do with the SKAdNetwork. Like, we just want to tell Apple what we really care or what we want to see back from the campaigns. Okay, so I want to see an event, I want to see a revenue range, I want to see what I want to see. So you need to tell them what you really care about, and then Apple is going to do the work for you, and then they're going to send you back the post. That's it. Okay. So now that you understand what Apple wants to do with this, then you need to understand the logic in which you're going to apply the conditions and the inputs to the model. So, or the mapping, whatever you want to call this. So I have this case lately where this is like really interesting company. They were like series C, D, E, like raising a ton of VC money here. And when I audit their account, they have like in the fine value range, they were using like maybe 10 or 15 values, which is it's okay. But the issue was that they were using combining events within the same value, and because they were using combined values and only one event was sitting alone, which was maybe like I don't know e-commerce purchase or something like that. Only one bid was being triggered by Apple, and all the previous stages of the funnel were not being triggered because they were combining it with the e-commerce purchase, of course. And it was like, man, you can see the dashboard, which only one value is being triggered here, and you are killing all the previous one. And you will tell me this is just like an indie issue, right? Like a small company issue. But they were like I don't know, 100 marketing team employees working there. So
Incredible.
it was crazy to see that. And they didn't understand this because, or they didn't realize what's going on because they don't understand the logic, the core of it. So my recommendation here is I can tell this funny story with Thomas Pettit. This was like 2022, I guess, and we were in an event in Marbella, I guess, and I was struggling with for some months with the mapping that we were using for a specific app, and it was like I really want to only use one bit. Like I just care about trials. I don't care if there was like an onboarding completed. I just want to see trials coming in. So we were having this dinner with Thomas, and I told him, "Hey Thomas, I don't know what. Sorry that I'm bothering you with work today, but what do you think about this?" And he was like, "Listen, Lucas, that's what I'm trying to tell to everyone, but I can't tell this in a public event because they will think I'm going crazy." So I was like, "Okay, this is good." And then I try to simplify it. Okay, so my tip will be try to go as simple as possible. If you're like a junior or a newbie when it comes to mapping, try to keep it as simple as possible. Try to simplify the approach when it comes to reporting on the SKAdNetwork API, and then you're going to enjoy the way you analyze data. So don't
But
think that
surely,
because
surely
you're
the more
not
you
using.
the more you simplify, the more chances are you're going to actually see the traffic coming through as well, because you'll have more coming through from each campaign, so that you will it won't be excluded.
That's right, and that's it. Just focus on what you care. You don't need to fill up to the 64 bits just because you think you're going to miss data. Don't panic about that. That's my tip. Of course, if you go to, I don't know, you told me that you were working with gambling apps, right? Uh, those type of companies, they use all the bits most of the time. Maybe on revenue ranges, this is better than me, maybe, but they use everything that they can to exploit
Yeah.
everything when it comes to data. But maybe subscription apps or ad revenue apps, they don't need to care that much about that. Maybe if the strategy is to use revenue ranges when it comes, for example, with AppsFlyer with the AF skate revenue event that it's auto generated with the SDK,
Yeah.
maybe that's a good choice. For example, like that's something that I recommend to use that event from the MMP and try to use the 64 bits only based on revenue. Maybe at the beginning I would use closer ranges to understand the purchase value of these in-app purchases. And then when it comes to big whales I don't know how you call it, but really big purchases. Like I like to expand the range at the top of the value. So, but yeah,
Either
that's
either
just
either
my
whales
opinion.
or krakens.
Exactly.
All right, so like given the last WWDC and the sort of lack of any major updates surrounding SKAN, we had effectively a name change. Do you think Apple's done with it? Do you think they've kind of ticked the boxes? They've won the advertising race, saying that they're incredibly security conscious and privacy centric and everything else. And now the world's sort of moved on to AI, and that was the showcase for Apple this year at WWDC. Do you think? I'm interested to know how you see SKAN progressing over the next period of time.
So my personal take here, and you will hear a lot of different opinions, but my personal take will be that, and this is something that I really wish they would do. Uh, so I'm kind of biased, but basically, I expect them to block IP paste or fingerprinting at all. Uh, I don't see both models coexisting for a long time. I don't see this working. I don't see that. I mean, I know, and because I talk with some folks, and Apple knows that until they don't block this, a lot of companies are going to trust AEM, or a lot of companies are going to use the MMP's attribution models,
But
which it's all right.
I guess that's what I was getting at in terms of have they like been through this and come to the conclusion that, hey, not sure we need to go any further. This is done now, and what's next?
So I think they're when you less expect this, they are going to push the big change. And when I say the big change or the big shift in the industry, they will basically tell everyone, I'm the only one, or the only guy or the only company that it's going to tell you what's going on. And that's real power, right? And of course, maybe this is not going to be the best for MMPs or ad networks, but I think there's a big chance that this is really good for advertisers or app developers because on the complex or the refer app ID, the probabilistic, the deterministic models with different styles or different concepts, they will be gone. And it will be easy for us to work with a single API that trying to install
But
different
it's
SDK.
only good for the ones that have already started that learning experience, right? I mean, like if you're doubled down on probabilistic and suddenly Apple does make this change, then you have to suddenly go through that entire learning curve of working with SKAN and trying to figure it all out and how it would best operate for your company.
That's true, but I think that's necessary.
Yeah,
Like that should be
yeah.
happening in some point in history. And the best way to learn something is not if you have the motivation, but you need to do it if you want to make money or try to to survive in this industry in some way. So my take is that Apple will delay this maybe some year, 2 year, 3 years, and we are going to see some small changes when it comes to the API. Uh, some good improvements like re-engagement and all of this stuff that they released in the previous event.
Yeah, yeah.
But the big shift would be that they will own the measurement industry like a whole. And of course, MMPs will be really helpful to simplify this. But also, and this is something that I really concerned about, is that um, how can I say this? So basically, if for example you're Adam, you own a small publisher, right? You're a small app developer. You have like a 5 employees working on creating new apps, and you want to work with SKAdNetwork. Right now, for you, it's really, really complex, to not say impossible, to decode or try to enrich the postback from Apple. Okay, and I believe that that's like a really bad thing. So another thing that I believe that Apple will try to deploy if they want to, try to make this more accessible for everyone, it's try to enrich the postback payload. And when I say try to enrich the postback payload, I mean add, for example, the campaign name from the ad network. Try to add the ad level data from that network, try to enable conversion windows manipulation. So try to enrich the postback that you or Apple sent back to the developer. Nowadays, if you want to know what's going on, only MMPs have this type of access in the industry. And that's why people, in theory, should be paying for an MMP, right? Because they can't enrich this postback from Apple. So this is something that, I've been talking with a lot of companies, and is that MMPs are useful, but most of the people that I talk to, they don't know why they are paying to an MMP. And that's something that it's kind of concerning to me, because they don't get the real potential of an MMP if they don't know why they are paying for. And if you run iOS campaigns, which this is what we're talking today, you need to understand how the post-back enrichment process works. And basically, this is something the ad network sent back to the MMP. And that's why everyone wants an MMP. Everyone wants to work with an MMP. Everyone uses an MMP. And if they don't use an MMP, they just could run maybe Google and Facebook, and that's it. They can go with TikTok. They can go. It's hard to go with ASA, with Apple Search Ads. It's really hard to go with Twitter or whatever.
It's hard to go with multiple sources. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But if Apple push these changes, I think that will start to be possible for app developers in the future.
Cool. Right. I've got a final couple of questions. One of which I want to throw a little bit of a curveball in with a question that I haven't given you prior knowledge of. So I heard this brilliant question in a panel a while ago, which kind of surprised the hell out of me. If you're running user acquisition for a company right now and you get an extra 20K on the budget, what would you do with it?
Okay, cool. That's a good question. So
it's fun to just put you on the spot.
No, this is a good one. But basically, first, I will need to first know or understand the situation or what's going on there. But if we are losing money, I would not spend those 20K bucks. I won't spend those $20,000 if I know that we are losing money, because they will be gone pretty fast. So the way I like to work, and I work at a fintech back in the day, and we were losing a ton of money every single month, and the goal was to burn money basically. And when you have that mindset, that's not that good. Yeah, it's not that good, to be honest. But once you start to work with a publisher or an app developer itself, you need to make money to survive. So you Absolutely. Understand that you can't run a campaign if you're not being profitable. So first, I will ask if we're making a profit out of what we're doing today. If that's the case, then I will maybe search for the best channel, the best ROAS, or the best ROI campaign that we are currently running. Maybe I will deploy maybe a percentage of that into one of the things that I really like to do is try to how can I say this, like trying to improve the creative pipeline. And by improving, I mean like we can deploy different AI creatives, work with different low budget UGC content agencies, try to work with different ad network programs. But I'm not
throw out a few tests, spend a bit of money on a few different tests and see what happens. Yeah,
exactly. But I don't think 20K will change the game for most apps out there. But I can tell you that if you're an app that you're not making that much money, I will use those 20K with the mindset of, okay, I have this to invest. Let's see what Facebook or Meta or TikTok or any ad network has to tell me. Like, try to use that to get feedback from that network, and try to think of an exchange of information instead of that this is going to change your life. So you can feel more safe in that you're actually going to get data based on what you really care. Maybe subscriptions, maybe not purchases, maybe you want to have installs, which I don't agree with that, but there are different cases. So
good answer.
It depends.
Good answer. I like that. On the spot as well. Brilliant. Okay, what do you? This is another quite nice one, really, and I think there's a lot of people who are going to be listening to this that may be newer into user acquisition. So, what do you know now that you'd wish you'd known at the sort of start of your career when you first went into user acquisition?
That's a good question. So once you start to work in industry for multiple years, one thing that I like nowadays is that my bullshit detector or radar, it's quite polished in some way. So I
Yeah.
get to, I get to save a lot of time nowadays. When, for example, I go to an event and, this you have these panels that people talk about. For me, it's, to be very honest with you, like bullshit topics like AI and that no one cares about. Uh, I just go and eat some food, for example, or that's something that I really enjoy of working here for a long time. That you get to, once you hear someone that's really interested, you want to hear them a lot. You want to ask them questions, and you get to identify the best talents out there. That's something that I really like. The second one is that don't follow the path because everyone says that's the right thing. Uh, you
Oh,
need to test
I
it
like
by
that.
yourself.
I like
Uh,
that.
then this is something that Thomas Petty told me when I started working in industry. Don't take anything for granted because if this didn't work today, maybe it's going to work within 3 months. Maybe the
Absolutely.
context is different. Maybe there's like different contextualization of what's going on. Um, and the last one would be that UA it's just the starting point. Okay, and what I mean by this is that once you get to a certain point, you don't want to run UA campaigns anymore. Once you spend 30, 50, 100 million a year, the learning curve starts to go down and you don't have any much to learn there. So once you get to a certain point, you understand the UA, okay, it's a solid starting point into the industry, but then you want to learn more about ad monetization. You want to learn about ASO. You want to learn about payroll optimization. You want to learn about data. You want to learn about attribution, about SKAdNetwork. You really care about uh, I don't know, product analytics, how to integrate a data stack, how how we can make revenue out of this. So it's not only about UA. So I don't know if this answers the question, but it's the learning is that UA it's just the starting point.
I think that's one of the best answers that I've had, actually, in all honesty. Like the fact that it's not UA is not just UA. There's loads of contributing factors from all over the rest of the company which have an impact on user acquisition. I think that's always an important one to know. Okay, so last one. Where do you find knowledge? Like, where do you look for more information on things when you want to dig further into different areas? Like SKAN, for instance. How did you compile the knowledge that you obviously have on SKAN?
Great, I love this question. So when it comes to SKAdNetwork, I made a presentation this year in Berlin and Paris talking about this, like the monopoly over the content loop that nowadays I believe MMPs have, which that good, I don't care. That's a fact. Like if you search for SKAdNetwork, Apple documentation won't appear on the first page, of course, and you will see a flyer, just branch, whatever. And because nowadays MMPs have like this really interesting or really big relevance when it comes to knowledge. Like if you want to learn about this, universities are not teaching app growth or app related stuff. So MVPs are like a really good resource to start with. But sometimes when you're really curious about the actual infrastructure that runs behind this, uh, MVPs don't go that far. Okay, and that's all right. But sometimes you need to do things to actually understand what's going on. So that's one of the things that I'm doing today with AppStack. Okay, and basically because I needed to understand the logic behind SKAdNetwork. And one of the things that I did was, okay, how does SKAdNetwork works without an MMP on the side, without an MMP in the middle, sorry. And then you start to, you know, connect all the dots. And okay, because we have a publisher, then we have the advertiser, and the postback goes to this endpoint, and then that network uses this raw postback copy to optimize the campaign. Then you can reach the postback by querying their API if they have this available. So you get to have the full picture. And one of the reasons why I'm also working on AppStack, it's because when you want to learn, this is the best thing that you can do. Try to build stuff from scratch. And because I get to build this, I get to understand the real value of an MMP. And the fact that today in the industry, if you don't have an MMP, you can't have anything else nowadays. Like I wish Apple has like a native solution for us that you can work with them free, like you can operate with them if it's needed. But of course, that's not real today. And that's why it was like, you know, because I was working back in the day with another MMP, and this company didn't have that much money, right? And because they were, I don't remember if they were raising the prices or the support was not really good. I don't remember that case, but we were forcing us into a situation like we can't afford this, like we can't. And we were like, okay, what we can do now? So we started to learn, okay, there's this API, how we can process the data, how we can receive the JSON, how we're going to structure the tables, how we're going to pass this into our product analytics tool, how we're going to enrich this postback with the missing fields that the MMPs own or has within. So I was learning a lot by doing this thing outside of the typical landscape that everyone uses. So this is something that I want to tell you. But every time I go to, for example, to an event or like a conference or whatever, something like that, and they ask me, oh, when I was working at MonkeyTap, for example, we were spending like a lot of money, and we weren't working with an MMP, and they were like, you don't know what you're talking about, Lucas. Like, you don't know anything about how this works. And then I was like, how can I tell you? But the truth is that once you get forced into a situation like that, you really value what MMPs do. You really value what you can learn. And of course, it's hard to find good talent. But for example, David Phillipson, the founder of Dataseed, uh, I believe he's one of the smartest guys when it comes to SKAdNetwork. He is really, really smart. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He is really smart. And for example, you can follow him. He posts really interesting content related to SKAdNetwork, and he also built companies around that, right? And that's like a really interesting voice to hear. And also, for example, maybe the VP of product measurement from AppsFlyer, he's also active on the mobile dev demo Slack channel, open to help everyone. So, I really like that from the VP, and also different companies. So my recommendation to learn about this, try to force yourself to think outside the MMP landscape. Use the MMP as a first step to boost your knowledge, and then you can get back to it to, okay, maybe they're helping me with this, so I know that I can implement this in this specific way. And maybe if I don't have the resources, I encourage you to try to build this on your own. Uh, Maybe this is not going to work, but at least you will understand all the effort and all the way you can process all the data, and maybe overlapping the duplication, how you can push this to different sources, or how you can put this or this input or this output, what you can expect. Like there are a lot of different stuff that you can learn from this. And of course, please don't read Apple documentation to learn about this because it sucks, to be honest with you. I wish they improved this a lot, to be honest with you. Uh, but yeah, MMPs are a good starting point. So thanks for having me, Adam.